Ladies and gents, this is the moment you've waited for.
What's up, guys? Metrics Mike here. Our favorite drug is back, NFL season. And I joke about that, but I text Gil that the other day that I was updating the models and adding the new players, changing a few formulas, and man, I was just so excited just to see what our projections were going to be. I'm working late into the afternoon, into the evening with focus and clarity that I don't usually experience, and it's amazing just the excitement of the NFL, man. It has us all, at least for a while, until maybe the NBA takes over in 10 years. But as of now, NFL is the king. I'm so excited. Maybe it's a little bit irrational excitement over the success that we've had the last 2 years with this model, and some new things coming down the pipeline that I'm really excited about. Going to get into more player props this year and really dissect these games, dissect these matchups that I think we can do with our model a little bit better than the market can. So let's get into that really quickly. Going to look at our recap from last season. After that, we'll do a quick review of the fundamentals of our model, kind of how we built it, and the ideas and the assumptions and the philosophies that we take. Then I'll get into some of the changes that we made to the model. I think they are logical. I'll explain them and kind of show our thought process behind them. And then finally have an idea for the Slack channel that we're going to look for active participants to really specialize in one, maybe two teams. And I'll get into that at the end of the video, but I think it's an idea that could really help everybody in the community. All right, last season NFL win totals. You can still see on this page NFL 2017 results. It's linked on the homepage, and I'll link it under the video here as well. But you can see a little bit of a write-up. You can watch our video that I went into each of our season win totals last year. We had 6 of them. Here in the screenshot, you can see the list of every single team and our projections for the full year. And our official plays went 5-1. We lost the Bears. Going back in that video, said they had a lot of frontline talent and it had gotten injured the previous year. Well, that happened again. A lot of frontline talent, both offensive line, wide receivers. Not that they were super talented wide receivers, but losing their high-end guys didn't help. And then defensive line, so a couple of strengths of their team, we just lost to injuries again. So not much surprise that we lost one there. Jacksonville nailed that one, kind of identified quickly with the additions of Calais Campbell and AJ Bouye. That defense was going to be spectacular. I think our model, the way we use Pro Football Focus player grades, we're able to spot that a little bit earlier than the market. Chargers, man, that team, and we're going to battle this again this year, incredibly talented, especially pass defense, which is maybe the most undervalued thing in the market. So everybody knows quarterbacks are valuable. Everybody kind of knows offensive line, but then fantasy football messes up the people's perception of what positions are valuable. But pass defense is something that doesn't get a lot of attention in the media. And the Chargers have, we'll go into that in a little bit too, but unbelievably good cornerbacks and safeties and coverage linebackers, which is a focus of the model this year. So, but of course, there's a downside I'm getting to. Their coaching is just awful, absolutely awful. Warren Sharp's done a good job of pointing out just how bad this coaching staff is, how old, how antiquated, and it looks like they did make a few adjustments at the end of last season. But man, hard to have any confidence, and that win total this year is set pretty high. But we did squeak over their 7.5 last year. Probably should have been a little bit easier win than it was. We had to really sweat that one out, but that was fun. Got the Chargers. Giants under, nailed that one. Scheduling factors was a big part of that. They played 3 teams coming off a bye, so that alone is just devastating, especially to try to be over 500, 9 wins. They had a lot of problems, offensive and defensive line, not defensive line, but offensive line in particular. That was a pretty easy win. Miami, Tampa, same thing. 2 teams with really poor foundations, offensive and defensive line. They had skill positions, but Tampa did. Pretty easy unders there. And then you can see our week by week here on this page as well. All the pages are linked, but the overall record here, you can see 89 wins, 67 losses, average odds minus 112, won about 22 units, and that's betting. If you go through these projections, we usually bet 1 unit or maybe less, half a unit sometimes. So pretty conservative bet sizing. The biggest mistake that we see people make is they come in and they bet way too much, way too big of a percentage of their bankroll on any given day, any given week even, and then just can't withstand the inevitable ups and downs, the variance of results when we're trying to get 55%. You know, if you've been around this industry, you realize how hard that really is to get 55% or so long term. But even within that, you can have some big swings up and down, and if you get wiped out in a little bit of a downturn, and which forces you to quit, or just you can't handle the big swings, and then you decrease your bet size at that time after you hit a losing streak. That's just awful from an expected value standpoint. So you want to know that those kind of streaks are coming and be able to stay in the game comfortably without getting super stressed out with the dollar value. But that is a different conversation. All right, let's do a quick review of the fundamentals of our model here, and just what you're looking at when you look at the matchup page. So we take the philosophy that the most important people on the football field are offensive line, defensive line, and coverage. So that includes secondary and now linebackers, increasingly important this year. And this is perfect because a lot of fantasy football has skewed the perception in the betting market of what's really valuable on the football field. So since everybody's incentivized to get points for fantasy football, right, running backs, receivers, yards, touchdowns, that easily becomes, in the mind of people, how you grade teams, right? But we take the philosophy that that's just a simple byproduct of how well the offensive line, defensive line, and secondary is in each of those matchups. All right, so looking at this matchup page, we have the team up here, positions with the players, specific players, going down, and then their job description or their job duties, I guess. So quarterback only has pass run, running back, run and reception number, receivers only a receiving number, and then tight ends both a receiving, pass block, run block, and offensive line here, pass block and run block. So on offense, just like our baseball model, 100 is average, and you want higher the better. So this guy, 107, is 7% better than average. And one of the new additions to the model is I capped everybody, at least for the start of the year, at 80. So I wrote, you can see up in the Excel here, I wrote an if statement to, if their actual number is less than 80, let's just put them at 80, because the thinking goes that if they were really that bad, they could probably find a replacement player, because a lot of times Pro Football Focus will grade a player. Let's say he played in 3 games and he was injured during those games. So we got kind of an artificially lower number that he probably should have. And looking back in their career, maybe good players. They're kind of leveraging the system that if they were really that bad, they wouldn't survive. So going to cap the downside at 80, 20% worse. And we'll probably take that governor off once we start adding in the updated projections from this year. I think in football, more than other sports, recency is a little bit more valuable, especially in the case of some of the players like David Johnson running back for the Cardinals, had really bad numbers from his season last year, but he only played one game or something like that, a half a game, and got injured, and so it doesn't really make sense to rate him too much weighting into that full season of rating, which is only really one game. So capped everybody basically at an 80. It also allows for improvement. These guys, you got to remember, these guys are like 21 years old sometimes. And if so they have a lot of room for improvement from season to season. So just because they were graded pretty low in maybe a few games last season, but the fact that they're still starters going into the next year probably suggests that there's quite a bit of room for improvement, and a really low grade isn't warranted. Okay, and then moving over to the defensive side here, we always put the offense up against the actual defense that they're going to be playing. So coverage number, a run defense individual number, and again, 100 is average, but defense lower is better. Kind of a run suppression from baseball, carrying that over. So defense, you want to be lower than 100. So run defense category and pass rush. The way we combine them together, this is the grading, and I changed this formula a little bit. You can see up there. We will highlight it. We were giving last year about 25% weighting to the secondary and the run defense category. I think that's a little bit too high, so I updated that this year. Put a little bit more weight depending on if it was a 3-4 defense or a 4-3. About 60% to the front 3 or 4, and then 35% to the linebacker. So that's 95% up in the box. I think that's a better true measure of kind of their core run defense. And then still 5% in the secondary, but just not that big of a deal. So that number right there in R27 is our weighted average of their run defense. Talent-wise, this number here is Football Outsiders, and that's their DVOA defense number. So they were 4% better than average, the Packers, against the run. And then to get our projection, we're going to average those together. You can see the average formula there and take. So there's cases where a team could be more talented than their results last year. In the case of, this one's pretty close here, but the pass rush is a good example where the Packers pass rush was really good, about 20%, 19%, 18% better than average last year. You can see in that column. But now, this year, looking at their players and their specific player grades, that unit could be only about average, maybe slightly worse than average at a 102. So we're still averaging that together, but kind of interesting as you dissect these teams and who might have big drop-offs or who might have big improvements. Kind of interesting to see the difference in those two categories. So the bread and butter of our model, a lot of the weight is just these numbers right here. So offensive line, both from a pass block and a run block perspective, and then also coverage. I'd say that's second most important, just the really understanding the secondary and the linebackers. So including all the linebackers in the coverage, because as more and more teams use tight ends, as more and more teams throw to running backs, it's the linebackers, and having a good coverage linebacker that's flexible and can move around. Even if you just have one, at least one, probably two now. You can see the Packers have one really good cover guy and linebackers, but I think more and more you really need to have two to be a good team. You can bump down here to the Bears, and not to spoil things, but this coverage unit for the Bears, both in the secondary and the linebacker, are really good, or at least they don't have any weak links. 70 spectacular. Their corners, they're above average, but right about average, except for Amos, secondary 83. That's a really good number. But just like the Oakland A's this year in baseball, I know Paul Sporer on Gil's show mentioned that they had a good comment that they're just spectacularly average across the board at each position. And there's something to be said for that in football too. The Eagles last year going into the season, pretty similar, where they didn't have a lot of big names at the time going into the year, but man, they were just really solid. They had zero weak links across the board, which in the salary cap age, where it's really hard to build a complete team without any weak links, to have a defense in particular that just doesn't have any weak links, that is so effective. It's so hard to beat because you just have to earn everything. It's just it's a rare thing. And that's the beauty of this model here, is being able to identify the strengths and weaknesses of each team in these different perspectives, especially how they match up with each other. So let's look at the running game of the Bears up against the run defense of the Packers, and that's what these formulas over here. So we're taking, let's just look at one at a time. So the overall passing unit for the Bears is bringing in the quarterback passing number, the receiver numbers, and the pass blocking numbers all combined together to form a one number to grade the passing attack for this team, the Bears. So 93, that's 7% worse than average. So not that they're going to be great from that perspective, but you can see the Packers there, 97, and it seems a little bit low. It's being brought down by their Football Outsider offensive line number from last year was very low, 20% below, but they have talent at 105, so that should improve. I think they had a few injuries on the offensive line last year, so it does average out to a 92. Could be argued that they could be rated even a little bit higher. And then let's look at the team overall pass defense. So that's bringing in the coverage number and the pass rush number. So for the Bears, both really good, impressive numbers there, 91 for both of those. Equals a 91 overall for their number. And now these numbers right down here are kind of cool. So this is taking into the overall Chicago pass number matched up and scaled with the Packers pass defense number. So that's kind of an overall how well Chicago's going to do passing adjusted for this particular opponent. So this will be useful for, I think, daily fantasy type stuff, even just total stuff. So when you see both of their pass numbers well below 100, that's going to be maybe a pretty difficult game to score, at least passing wise. So that's something that I'm going to be looking for unders this year, is maybe when both teams have a bit of a run advantage and both teams have a biblical passing number. I think that should work pretty well. Okay, from here, let's take a tour inside our Excel file here inside the Crunch, and I want to show you an update that we did here. So PFF ODB, this is our entire database of the last couple of years of player grades, and up here is the baselines that we use. So look over here to start with. This is what we used last year, and we'll just identify the run number here for running backs. So we took all the players that were graded by Pro Football Focus and averaged them out to identify the average running back. The average rating of all those running backs were 61. We're changing that this year to remove some of the low end running back grades and only taking the top 35. So just to try to identify what's the actual starter level talent, what's an average starting level talent. So rather than taking maybe 100 some running backs that were graded and averaging that to 61, now we just took the top 35 grades. So you can see the threshold for average has been increased this year to 81. I think that's a better way to do it, to really identify who the extreme value add running backs are compared to kind of the average level talent. And this is a concept, if you guys still play fantasy football, footballguys.com, they have this draft dominator software that's really, really cool for fantasy football drafts, and it would just crush people back in the day. Now it's a little bit, the entire market of fantasy football is a little more sophisticated, but it would basically look at it had really good projection systems for the players, and it would identify based on the structure of your draft, the starting positions, the roster positions, and the talent, the projections of every position, and it would be able to find the relative value of each position and where there were big threshold drop-offs in production to know what positions to prioritize early in the draft, with the end in mind also of knowing that you can get talent at certain positions deeper in the draft, and looking at it holistically, which is really powerful. And kind of the main concept of that was to deprioritize quarterbacks early, and that is a big mistake that a lot of people made in fantasy football for years, is just because quarterbacks got a lot of absolute value points for fantasy football, people would draft them early, but that was a huge mistake, because the 8th best quarterback or even the 12th best quarterback in terms of projections at the start of a year isn't that much different than the second highest projected quarterback in a lot of cases, especially when you can combine like two late quarterbacks that schedules fit together, so you're always picking on a weak defense if you really plan ahead. That production was way better and less expensive in terms of draft picks than wasting one of your top picks on one of the top quarterbacks that you're just going to start every week. So that's a concept. Anyways, it got a little bit off track there, but they use a couple of different baselines where you can identify key differentiators is what we're going for in these ratings. So you can see I updated almost all the ratings. All right, so these are the skill position numbers on this page. So the pass number from last year was 69.7. That's been upgraded to 79 as average. We looked at running backs. Let's look at receivers. Receiver number 63 was average. Now that's been bumped up to 74. So you'll see some pretty big differences in our player grades this year, but I think overall it's still a relative number to how well they stack up against the average player. So still the same idea. The blocking numbers, we're not using these on this page. We have another blocking tab here. This is our blocking database, maybe the most important part of our model. And you can see in the middle here is the upgraded averages for, let's say, tackles, pass blocking was last year 69.5. That one stayed the same. Run blocking, tackles, 64 this year. It was 70 last year. All right, let's take a look at the overview page now. So this is, I hid all the other games, but this is what it looks like. It'll have every game on here with the Vegas spread at the time of posting, our projected spreads. You can see here the Packers are favored by 8. consensus line, but we say they should be favored more about like 3. So we are going to be playing the Bears in week 1, and then the spread, you can see the total is 47.5. We have a projected 42. So really like both of these defenses going up against the particular offenses. So going to be playing the Bears in the under, probably a first half as an official bet. Those first half lines are not out yet though, but generally prefer in the NFL until you're ready to bet max limits. Better in general, I think we found over the years to take the first half underdog, first half under, so that's what I'll be doing here. You can see our projected point totals here, our projected money line, Clear Data Sports. I'm going to be updating these 4 key matchups, passing, rushing. A little bit confusing the way it's set up, offense versus defense, rather than looking at an entire team number. So I'm going to edit those for a little bit more clarity. True talent number, this combines kind of the overall talent on the field for each team. Turnover margin last year, and that'll be updated for this year moving forward once we get into week 2 and beyond. And then overall analytics score. This was our rating last year, just on a couple of research articles that whatever we could find on how analytics friendly the organization was from top to bottom. And at the time, the Bears graded out at a 1. Luckily, they have a new head coach, Nagy, and seem to be moving in the right direction. The Packers got a 7 score at the time. I don't know if they deserve that high of a score, but it is what it is, and we're going to be looking at that a little bit more in depth in the next couple weeks. And coaching is a huge differentiator right now, I think, and we're going to be spending quite a bit more time analyzing that this year. All right, for season win totals, so went through each of the matchups every single week with our projections, looking at this win percentage. This is the win percentage that we estimate each team should have in this game, given our spread of 2.9. So we say the Packers are going to win this game about 59% of the time, the Bears 41% of the time. So now let's move over to this season win total projection file here. So you can see I gave the Bears 42% right there. And each week of the season moving forward, a corresponding win percentage, win probability of that game, and then added them all together. Got 8.27 total wins, and their number right now is about 6.75, so that's kind of a blend between 6.5 and 7. Of course, there's juice either way, so when you factor in the heavier juice, it's around about 6.75. So that gives us about a 1.5 game edge toward the over. Found this online, kind of a good schedule matrix, and then I filled in the rest days to identify which teams have a rest advantage going into each week, and then kind of a cumulative rest differential for the entire season over here in the far right column. And I'll post this on the member page so all the members have access to this. Kind of useful moving forward, especially when you're betting early lines for the next week, just to quickly see who has extra rest, especially as the season kind of gets into the middle of the season when you got a lot of things going on to keep track of. So this should be pretty useful. But looking at Chicago overall here, net +4, which is good. So 4-day advantage. Their first game here, Arizona, they'll be playing after a Monday night game. Seattle at Arizona with -1 rest, so not ideal there. But then have an extra day against Tampa the next week. Bye. They play at Miami, so they have a 7-day rest advantage there. 1-day rest advantage here, Buffalo. So that's good. They will play Minnesota at home with a -7. Minnesota will be coming off a bye, so that is definitely not ideal. But it is what it is. Home game against a division opponent, you don't really want them coming off a bye. But New York Giants, you can see here a 3-day advantage. That should be significant, a winnable game on the road, and nothing else. But overall, +4 for the season. Final factors for the Bears. New coaching staff, which is absolutely huge. Nagy coming over from the Chiefs, considered to be a good up-and-coming offensive coordinator, and then just the difference of going from John Fox and some of those old guys that just running an old system that just does not work anymore. And we've seen kind of what can happen going from Jeff Fisher to Sean McVay. what a big turnaround and really quickly can happen. I think we could see a similar turnaround with the Bears here. They have incredible frontline, not incredible. They have very solid frontline talent like we went into last year. Looking at that coverage in both the linebacker and secondary, that is critically important. They're not that great stopping the run, but I think that's okay, all considered. They have a couple of pass rushers, although this guy Trevathan and the other linebacker here, really important players, because think about if they're out. These are some of their top pass rushers, plus a coverage here with Trevathan and run defense here with however you pronounce that name. So it's something to keep in mind. Like if these guys are out, or one of them, or especially both of them, that could be a huge problem for the Bears. And that's one reason why I don't really like betting over season win totals, because if we lose one player, kind of like how we lost the Bears last year, it can be really devastating for a long period of time. However, I mean, in theory, it's probably pretty equal if other teams are also getting injured. It's a little bit harder to track how fair, I guess, those injuries are, because the Packers could, this week one's not a good example, but week 5 down the road, if they're playing it, their opponent has some serious injuries too, so you kind of benefit from it, but it can also hurt you also. I think I just prefer betting unders in general. We have a really good under this year. I think that we as our top play for members, but I think unders are just generally better because one injury to that team can really help you win the under versus having to have an over. You really have to have a lot of things go right to stay on the track. But that said, I think this is a really good play with the Chicago Bears. A quick look at Warren Sharp's preview. If you guys haven't bought that, highly recommend it. There's a few useful parts for us. A lot of it's just looking back, kind of results oriented, but there are some useful things in there as well. So health by unit, this is kind of an interesting, just kind of an overall grade. So 2017, they were second to last in terms of Scott's work at Football Outsiders, second to last in terms of health, so just really injured. The year before, they were dead last, so 2 straight years of just getting devastated by injuries. The casual fan doesn't remember that, doesn't realize it, doesn't take that into consideration. So that's a big potential advantage for this season win total. Just the perception of the team is bad, but really it's a little bit worse than it probably should be. This is a good thing for Warren Sharp too. The projected strength of schedule. So the graphic is the 2018 forecast, and the lower is easier. You can see here. So last year, the dot, they had the 7th, I guess, toughest offensive schedule, playing opposing defenses, and that's going to be quite a bit easier this year, as well as across the board. And last year they had the toughest defensive schedule, facing opposing offenses, and now at least that'll be a little bit better. So reason to believe that their perception in the market is significantly worse than they really are. And then when you combine that with losing the deadweight coach and bringing in some intelligent new coach and coordinators, this could be pretty exciting. You can see here that the offensive coordinator for the Bears this year is Mark Helfrich. So kind of an innovative mind. I think they're going to bring in RPO options for Trubisky that can, some of those run pass options that are a little bit more effective, a little more intelligent play calling, really getting guys open. And we're going to go so much deeper into coaching, but just wanted to touch on it quickly right now as pointing up for the Bears, getting rid of some of that dead weight. All right, let's take a look at one more week 1 matchup, a play that I really like. Want to show you some interesting thing about the Chargers. Not a lot of fanfare coming into the season, but man, this team on defense in particular, look at these coverage numbers from their linebackers into their secondary. Only one guy, and again, I capped the defense at 120, so nobody can be 20% worse than average. But their secondary and their coverage linebackers, this team is really going to be able to stop some people. Looking at Pro Football Focus, so they have Casey Hayward as the 2nd best corner in the league. Look at this guy. Desmond King, the 8th best corner in the league, both with the Chargers. And that's not all. Look at this. So not even in our model, because he doesn't even make the field, but the 19th best cornerback in the league, Trevor Williams, too. So this team is loaded. They also had one guy got injured. He's out for the year, unfortunately, but he was rated pretty well. as well as a cornerback. So they've got some talent, they've got some depth, they've got safeties, they've got covered linebackers. Run defense looks like it might be one of the weaknesses, although not that bad. And then pass rush. So the pass rush number is interesting because the way we do it, you can see our formula here. I'm giving 80% to the average of the line and then 20% to the linebackers in the 4-3. But I don't think that's really the best analysis because they have 2 high-end guys and then they have 2 filler guys. I think it's better to have, so taking an average doesn't really necessarily, I think, give a true picture of the ability to rush the passer in this case. Maybe, so they could be a little bit better than we actually have them projected. Pretty tricky to just model that correctly. And that's the power of really knowing these teams inside and out and being able to spend a little bit more time inside the model and looking at individual player grades, especially when you consider who they're specifically matching up with. So let's take the left defensive end is going to be going up against the right tackle. So if you can find an advantage where maybe you get a really bad pass blocking right tackle and you know they have elite talent at that left defensive end, you can find some problem matchups for teams inside these game matchups. So just something to keep in mind as you move forward handicapping football this year. This is a matchup that I'm looking to play the under, though. We've just talked about the San Diego Chargers' strength on defense. Let's look at the Chiefs' defense, and they got some guys that can cover too. Emerson's coming off an injury, so his grade last season was a bit lower than I think it should be, so capped him at a 120. But other than that, Eric Berry's still really good. Everybody else, Kendall Fuller, they had, I think, rated as one of the top corners in the league, although he's had a bad rookie season and had a good season last season. But they got some covered linebackers also, a bit of a weaker run defense, same thing. But I see that as kind of a good thing for the under. If the opposing game plan is to maybe attack both of the teams running and knowing that it's going to be difficult passing, that should be great for the under. And pass rush, they got some dudes as well. Still, Chris Jones, 87. Not great and not that impressive as an overall unit, but I think they, especially just behind that coverage number, should be a pretty good defense in this matchup as well. The other thing we look for before playing unders, or to ideally play unders, is a weaker offensive line going up against a solid defensive line. So both of these teams below average. Actually, the Chiefs below average. All the talent this year maybe a little bit better than they performed last year, but run blocking maybe not as good. So that kind of hurts the ability, if they do have a running game plan, to really execute that. Chargers, good offensive line, pass blocking last year, might be slightly not as good, 105, still above average though, good number overall for the Chargers. Pass block, run block, same thing, not that good. So kind of an interesting matchup of skills. Both teams, from a coverage standpoint, I think they're going to really struggle having success passing, but neither team really equipped to run the ball very well. So I don't really see many scores. It's a division game too. Each team knows the personnel of the division opponent. Also, Patrick Mahomes, young quarterback, maybe being asked to do quite a bit in week one, especially going up against a very skilled secondary. Andy Reid, the coaching staff, obviously knows that. Maybe, who knows how aggressive they'll be. So I think we could see a pretty good conservative under game plan here, and I'll be playing the under 47 in this game. Probably grab a piece of the first half under as well, maybe as a bigger play. But unfortunately, those lines are not out yet. I'm going to stay away from the Chargers win total this season. We have them projected slightly under where they're at right now. Kind of surprising given that defense. But just going to stay away from that coaching staff. Don't have a lot of confidence in them winning close games. Also, going back to the under, there are some new rules that are a bit concerning for unders. In particular, those helmet shots that just kind of head-to-head shots, I guess, that don't really look like they should be penalties, but they're going to be 15 yards and could extend some drives, especially maybe on third downs that are going to be really painful, that would have been punts. So something to watch moving forward, especially this year. Not ideal for unders. Also, Kansas City losing their offensive coordinator, going to the Bears. Nagy, hopefully, certainly can't be a good thing for the over in this game. Not sure how bad it'll be, but that's another factor as well. So I like this play week one. Okay, let's talk now about the Slack channel. There's some really cool things going on in our Slack channel. The members really active, kind of a cool place to exchange intelligent betting information. I want to take that to the next level. I think we can really do some special things in there as a community, because right now it's kind of interesting in the media landscape around sports betting. The really good people are generally not doing any media. They're not really sharing anything. And compare that to the poker community. It's just a different game, right? In poker, live poker in particular, online's a little different, but in live poker, it's such a localized opportunity, meaning the best players, you have to be sitting at the table to actually participate in the game. So a really good poker player isn't really losing that much value by sharing really in-depth strategy and thought process and their skill, basically, because there's so many games everywhere that good player can't possibly be in every single game, right? But that's a little bit different in sports betting, because a really good sports bettor, you don't really have to be localized. It's just you're betting into the market, and that books shift on air, so they don't necessarily have to take a bet to be moving the line. So one really good sports bettor, one really good sports betting group can kind of move the entire market, which makes it not very attractive to really share the edges that you have. So that's kind of we'll just be perfectly honest with you guys. We're looking at this as two different options. We have a model that we think we're pretty confident that's going to win and continue to win, at least for a little while, but not really sure how long it can continue to win. So we take the approach that it's better to build an intelligent, active kind of community around working together to beat sports betting. Now, we don't know exactly what sport will always continue to beat, if anything, but the real skills is being able to kind of continually analyze this stuff and identify new opportunities as they pop up. So this NFL model is a good example. I think it's a good winning model right now, but we're also willing to share it to kind of build a community. So we have guys in that Slack in our customer base that, really advanced data scientists, data warehouse guys, that they're making $200,000 a year in their current job, but it makes sense to all, as a hobby, they're interested in this stuff, and we can build something together it's way more advanced and just long-term profitable, whether it's this sport, whether it becomes tennis or golf or any other sport. That if we build the process, we build the skill set, we build the data ability to store and clean and collect and then analyze the data with our team, that's more of what we're interested in long-term. So anyway, that's a long way of getting into, we're going to be taking applicants for team specialists this year, and we've always talked about it for the last couple of years, how valuable it is just to focus on one team or one division and really understand that well, because there's so much analysis, so deep you can go into understanding how one team matches up with certain other types of opponents or certain other types of roster construction. And if you're trying to handicap the entire league all at once, it's just difficult. It's really difficult to do that, especially if you're trying to do multiple sports. Like, that's just literally impossible. Anybody that you see one person trying to do multiple sports, they're not that good. I would say it's just impossible to do multiple sports, to do it well, especially at the same time. So we're going to be looking for people who genuinely, truly want to specialize in one team. And it's harder said than done, because the temptation is always to do more, right? There's more games on, there's the Thursday game, there's the Sunday games, there's the Sunday night, there's the Monday night, right? There's always more, so it's easy to get distracted and want to do every single team. But I think there's so much value in just spending at least more time studying one team. And that's going to be my college football approach. I didn't do anything with college football last year. I might just pick one team, one of maybe the smart teams that have a good offensive line, and just really understand that type of team well. And it makes it so much more manageable than just trying to, especially for college football, if you're trying to, I remember back in college, just trying to bet probably 15 different games a day on a Saturday. There's no way that you can really truly understand each of those teams and their specific situations, their injury status. all of that stuff that you could better understand if you focus on one team. So you can see here we have an application page. If you're interested in this, we're gonna handle it in Slack right now. Thinking about next year, get a lot more sophisticated and start to collect some proprietary data on each team, have some good ideas on how we can do that. This year it'll mostly just be kind of a test where we'll post kind of thoughts in Slack. If you get chosen to be a team specialist, we'll just include that in your profile. So when you post something in our football Slack channel, everybody will kind of know what team you specialize in. I think this is going to be especially valuable on that Sunday early morning window well, two parts. So right before the games start, you get the injury lists, the active list, about 30 minutes before the game starts. So kind of sorting through that and understanding who's active, who's not. That's pretty valuable, especially because there's 8 or so games going on at the same time. So it's easy to get flooded with a bunch of new information all at the same time, and you're kind of having to quickly make decisions. So if we have one person that's ready for each of those teams to kind of analyze the pros and cons of the certain players that are active or inactive for both teams in that matchup, that's going to be pretty valuable. And then once the games start, actually watching the action. So when there's also 10 games going on, it's not ideal to be watching the Red Zone channel and all you're seeing is the fantasy football crap. But when a lineman goes out for either team, we need to know that, right? For live betting, we need to know, especially how valuable is that lineman, how good is their backup. Like understanding stuff like that is so incredibly valuable, especially in the live betting market, which is one of our main focuses for football. We could really do well with team specialists that are dialed into the player grades of each of their particular team, but also in that particular matchup of the team that they're playing. So if you guys are interested in that, just go ahead and fill out the application here, and we'll get some teams assigned. And you gotta be committed to watching that team's game every single week. So if it's in that 10 a.m. window, which most of the games are, you gotta just watch that game, and red zone's not ideal in that situation. It'll be easy for standalone games, obviously, as that's the only game going on. But really, the value is that 10 a.m. window, even the afternoon slot when there's 3 or 4 games going on, to really be dialed in, especially as players go in and out of the game, and identifying just how valuable they are using the player grades. So I think that'll be really cool, guys. If you want to take part, if you want to be a part of that, just go ahead and fill out the application. And we'll have all that in Slack as well for our members. All right, final announcement. If you guys are not members yet, really encourage you to come join our team. Really trying to build something special here, just sharing all of our best information, our best knowledge, and trying to just consistently win long term with a good community of we don't want if you get rich quick type customers. All the other pick sellers, though, they kind of want those people who want willing to spend more money and kind of selling the get rich quick dream. That is not what this is. This is an absolute grind. It's very difficult to win long term, but it's also very possible. It's a fun hobby if you enjoy the intellectual pursuit of winning something that's very difficult and combining kind of your intelligence, your knowledge of being able to analyze some of these games in new and innovative ways. Really, really fun hobby. Got to keep it safe. Don't bet too much. So many people get into trouble doing that, but just make sure keeping it healthy, keeping it proper bet sizing. But if you guys want to become members, so right now we have our win totals out, and under in particular, that's our top play. I think is a really good play this season. We have our week 1 plays. You'll get detailed personnel matchup pages for every single game all season long. You get access to the Slack channel, what I just described, the idea that we have for this season and team specialists. And also going to be doing a lot more player props this season. I don't know exactly what that'll look like just yet, but working on some new ways, business intelligence tools to analyze really in-depth play-by-play information. So should be good, guys. It's going to be a fun year. Going to do a lot more content this year. And yeah, hope you come along for the ride. All right, guys. Talk to you soon.